about citizenship and the issues around that. I just shared two resources. You can just have a look. I promise that I will come back with some new
Annie,
references.
sorry to interrupt now. There's one question which I could not take it up. Like Prayat is asking me, quality of brain drain does not match with the brain gain. That is true. I agree with you, Prayant. The quality of brain drain doesn't match with the brain gain. That's what, no, India, we don't have policy to tap those talents. We have policies which we are not taking off. It's not very active. That Indian bureaucracy is very slow, so we have to motivate our best brains who are staying out of the country, to contribute constructively for the growth of R&D climate in India as well as other sector. For example, health. I think in health we are receiving good response from the doctors who are outside in the country, but in fact in even engineers also there's just investing in startups and all, but scientists still they are not coming forward to help to improve the scientific climate in the country. That's where we are still lacking. I agree with you, so that's a fault of the government. Our government of India should uh, have an active proactive policy to welcome them, to integrate them with our planning. I'll stop here. Thank you, Annie, for this time, and also I thank others also for joining this class. Okay, bye bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Mahalingam. Okay, let's continue and let me try to share. Whereas I can share the screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's happening. Yeah. Okay. Just a second. So today, like last time we discussed about the demographic implications, and before that we already had some overview on what diaspora is, what migration is. But today we will go into the economic determinants of migration and how economic factors, or in general, how the economic factors are impacting migration flows and the behavior of migratory groups. That's why during this 1 hour, we'll try to understand the meaning and in general, the concept of the economic determinants, the role of these determinants in making migration decisions, and various types of economic determinants. And after all, maybe we'll manage to develop some understanding on how economic determinants can facilitate or just the opposite, restrict international migration decisions. Just in general, we already know that migration is not just like it is a very complex phenomena. So various things can affect and influence migration decisions, the decision taken by various groups. It can be like last time also we discussed, these factors can be economic, they can be political. For example, if you remember last time, we already discussed about in general, ideas of during the 17th and 16th, 17th centuries. If you remember, we divided into historical periods. The indentured labor in the 16th, 17th, and afterwards, and then post-colonial period, and then after the independence period. And during all these times, we discussed both the political and economic aspects and the factors that affected migration decisions. Now, when we are talking about the meaning and the general concept of economic determinants, we have to understand that migration is like we have to take it in a certain context. Like, for example, as I mentioned, a certain historical period, or it can be political context, and which is specific to that time period, and there is no general explanation for migration decisions. For example, the Indian diaspora or any other diaspora, it can be like the outcome or the result of many factors, like economic, political, and migrants can be pushed and they can be pulled by various determinants, like starting from the deteriorating economic conditions or political unrest. And they can often be pulled by, again, like by destination countries, which can offer them like high wages or good health care, strong educational system, or even the linguistic proximity can be like a pull factor for the for migratory groups to migrate to another country or another destination. So that's why when they are making decisions, individuals, while making decisions for migrating, they compare the net benefits of migration to the costs. And as you see, I just mentioned a few, like one of the major like things in the like low agricultural income, agricultural unemployment, and underemployment. This can be one of the economic determinants of the for the migration and for affecting or impacting migration decisions. And that's why the better perspectives for economic well-being and living opportunities, those can be like the major factors. Now let's just see the economic factors that are influencing international migration. Generally, individuals, being rational humans, they make their decision based on their self-interest in order, as we already mentioned, to maximize their earning. And they generally do this cost-benefit analysis before migrating or deciding to migrate to other destinations. Like for that comparison, they would take like the wages can be the point of comparison, like a higher standard of living, better employment opportunities, income, more comfortable safety nets. All these things, they can be they can be the point of this comparison. And international, as mentioned by the by Connecting International Labor Markets Working Group, like from a purely economic perspective, migration barriers impoverish the world, and they eliminate barriers to labor mobility. They can also add tens of trillions of dollars to global GDP. In fact, when we are talking, I think we'll come to the next, in the next slides, we'll again discuss about it. But in fact, when we are talking about the migration and the various economic factors that affect migration, in this case, it's not in many cases, it's affecting the destination countries also positively, because that can add to the what was that word, like that can add to the growth of the economy for the destination country. And that's, in many cases, that's affecting positively to the destination country. But of course, when we are talking about taking the decision of migrating, generally it's many research studies, they show that the impoverished individuals, they are very rarely taking the route to migration, because that can include like various expenses such as the visa or other related documents. and this can affect also like the route of migration as well. That's why that undocumented migrants, they make up a large portion of the migration population. And you can see that in many cases, like the very impoverished migrants, they are either undocumented migrants, or they can also that is simply they can also not decide to take the decision to migrate. But yeah, we were talking about these economic factors that promote migration, significant impact on a country's economy, growth and development. This can be another implication to just understand what it can affect on. And it also leads to the economic growth, since migration typically adds to the development of human capital in receiving nations and accounts for a significant portion of the country's GDP. This was what I was just talking before in the previous slide, that it can generally positively affect the destination country in many cases to the growth of the economy. And if you see this World Migration Report, according to this report, there are million migrants, and millions more would prefer to migrate if offered a better wage chance. Economic migration decisions are influenced by a variety of macro and microeconomic factors. We should also distinguish between these macro and microeconomic factors when talking about the economic determinants. But in general, when we are talking about the economic factors, economic considerations, and other factors that influence migration, they are typically influenced, like I mentioned, by various factors, with immigration regulations in both the host and destination nations being one of the most important factors that influence migration decisions. And other reasons can also be there. This can be generally, we can include this into the macroeconomic level also. Like you see the regulations which are brought up by the host country and the regulations which are brought up by the home country, they can equally affect on how the migrant groups or an individual can take a decision for migration, or just the opposite. It can also, he or she can also take a decision not to migrate. Like you see here, stocks and flows of migrants, wage rates in destination and origin countries, economic opportunities in both origin and destination countries, inflation in both host and origin countries, exchange rates, currency exchange rates in destination and host countries, and the ability to transfer funds from home countries to the destination, from host country to home countries, are all macroeconomic impacts. These are all, including the regulations, these are all like part of that entire macroeconomic level policies that can affect the migration, back and forth migration. There are also, like, regarding this push and pull factors, there are numerous justifications, theoretical, that they provide the link between the migration and the factors that influence migration decisions. I'm not sure if you can see here, like within the push factors, economic push factors, poverty is mentioned there, high taxes, high unemployment, overpopulation. We were discussing demographic impact also last time. But in the pull factors, that is the larger economic political, policy atmosphere, or the environment that is in the host country, that can affect or impact migration flows. Those can include the demand for labor, high wages, generous welfare benefits, good healthcare, education systems. These are largely the push and pull factors established in the host and home countries. And we should also keep in mind that despite the fact that there have been multiple ideas on migration, like we discussed previously also, the push and pull hypothesis, it remains quite relevant in influencing migration decisions. There can be like numerous definitions or concepts of migration, but what impacts migration flows, the economic and non-economic push and pull factors, they are generally the same. Over time, something can be prioritized. The other factor can be less important for taking a decision to migrate, but overall, they are the same. They generally are constant, let's say. And as we see, the better earning prospects or high wages, they are the primary motivation points for people or for individuals to move from a developing country to a developed country from the economical aspect. And one of the most important economic variables in migration decisions is the country's low level of income. And also the education, also in many cases, families try to get better education for their children in more developed economies where they can find better prospects of good education. Like we mentioned, the economic, one of the most important economic variables is, of course, the low level of income. But at the same time, it can be, this factor can be both the push factor and the pull factor. This can be both at the same time, depending on from which aspect you are looking at, from the host country perspective or the home country perspective. And of course, high income levels, they are also like primary source for the motivation to take a decision of migrating. We in scholarly literature, there is this Gini coefficient that we distinguish. It is basically a statistical measure of economic inequality. Maybe as far as I remember, some of you are specialized in economy. Perhaps you know about this, and later if you have something to add about this coefficient or something to elaborate, to give more details about this, you can do that. I'm just giving you the general overview of this coefficient, which is basically based on statistical measurement of the inequality, economic inequality in a population. And this coefficient measures the dispersion of income or distribution of wealth among the members of a population. This also has some, while doing these statistical calculations or measurements, we can also see the general picture of the migration flows within the country and to a destination country. And in many research studies, they consider migration as a result of relative deprivation. This is another way of looking at that. Migration is a choice. Of course, in many cases, it is a choice, but in many cases, this is a choice that is influenced by family also, which is already part of the sociological studies on migration. But when we are talking about the economic one, we should also mention that it is also people's choices. That is this choice which is influenced by their degree of pleasure or deprivation compared to the community they belong to. So basically, we will come to one in the next slides also. The social environment also has a big, let's say, the society and the social environment also has a very big influence on taking up decision to migrate. In during the last lecture, we were discussing this migration from north to south or south to north, this north-south corridor migration. If you remember, last time when we were discussing basically the demographics, in this migration, north-south corridor migration, both of the factors that we mentioned before here, these push and pull factors, economic, they are both at play when we are talking about this north and south corridor migration. And if we think about migration from the neoclassical perspective, then wage differences in rural and urban regions are major reason for male exodus. This also brings to another major sociological, let's say, research, which is like the gender migration as well, when we are talking about it. But as far as we are discussing only the economic one, we will focus on this. But there is another approach that supports this hypothesis, that income differences are major reason for migration. And generally, in many of the research studies, it's the income, the wages that impact the decision on migration. This, as you see, the Gini coefficient, we already discussed about it, which is like the statistical measure, and it the dispersion of income and distribution. This you can just keep it in your mind. But in this Gini coefficient, when we are talking about the economic inequality, the sociological part, as I mentioned in between, it should not be like disregarded or neglected. It also has to be taken into account while talking about the economic measurements of the inequality, while measuring the economic inequality of the society. There is another method. Let me see if I cannot, but this is like the impacts NELM method. Migration, which considers migration that it is a risk and income diversification strategy utilized by rural households in low-income countries. So you can see that there are like impacts, economic, social. And then the household, which is also a big, the household, like we mentioned, that the migration decision can be affected also by the family or the household, the general economy of the household. There can be also social factors, and this NELM, this method, it's basically considering all of them, all the factors all together when talking about the economic inequality in general in the society. This was put forward by Stark. I think we let me see. No, we didn't. Yeah, Stark. This was put forward by Stark. And he generally brings the economic, he puts forward the economic differences, or he focuses on the economic differences, the deprivation, like migration, as we mentioned, it is the result of deprivation of something. It can be economic, it can be sociological, and this deprivation can be a strong motivation for migration. That's why it is like basically called the NELM, that is the labor, focusing on the labor migration. And in this sense, it is very difficult. Like in neoclassical framework, we were talking about the high wages, low wages, but in this method, it's not primarily, the focus is not primarily the neoclassical framework, but also the sociological aspect which is coming, like as a result of poverty and other risks. And let's just move forward. The income instability and low income, it is also part of the economic determinants in the society. They can also have another major impact on while taking decision to migrate. And if there is a lot of variety and instability in income, it could be, of course, like motivating for people to migrate. And you can judge that as a result, there can be like lower income volatility in the host nation. It can act as a deterrent in migration considerations. But if we are looking at this from the Marxist perspective, it can be different. And well, system theories, they can also see like migration as a global capitalization. If we look at from the Marxist perspective and other theories, and they are more concerned about the marginalization, displacement of rural population around the world. And as a result, migration, it can be seen as a process that caters to the requirements and interests of major multinational corporations and capitalists. This is like another perspective from the Marxist theorists. But of course, we have another like dual labor market theory, which was developed in 1970s. According to this theory, migration, it is mainly driven by permanent demand of cheap labors in developed countries that is often met by migrant labors from low and developing economies. So this is another like perspective of looking at the migration from the like economic aspect. So for now, we discuss like within the economic determinants, low, high wages, the GDP. We discussed this income instability, low income, which was looked upon by how it is looked upon by Marxist theories and the neoclassical theories. But of course, when and this is generally about when we are talking about this dual labor market theory, we should generally talk about the unskilled and labor, also unskilled and unorganized labor from low-income countries. And so far, the research studies, they show that there is insufficient legal system for regulating this sphere or the exploitation of the unskilled labor. This is just in general. But when individuals, they are taking the cost-benefit analysis, it is another, let's say, not an impact, that this is generally the practice that is taken by the individuals in general, like their behavior of comparing the cost-benefit analysis. And this is generally taken by the family, and it can be influenced by the family, because it's not like migration is not simply like an individual decision in many cases, but the family as a whole, it also they also determine whether you should migrate or not. The member of the household should migrate or no. And when making that decision, generally they discuss the cost-benefit analysis, comparing it. And the cost-benefit analysis of migration, it was, like we mentioned in previously, it was mentioned generally by the neoclassical theorists. And this method, of course, it allows migrants or potential migrants to take a decision or a right decision whether to migrate or not. Then, of course, like we talked about the macro level and the micro level. Again, the neoclassical theories, they explain migration at the macro level as regional and geographical disparities in labor supply and demand. But when we are talking about the micro level, then it views individuals as rational and income maximizing actors. And it is on this level when the family also comes forward to do this cost benefit analysis and to decide whether the migration should be taken as an option or not. And it is, of course, in this case, it is based on the migrants' expectations for maximizing the income. And the inadequate human and economic development, I won't go deep into this, but this also has it is another factor within the economic determinants that can also affect the decision for taking migration as an option for better living standards. These indicators, the expectancy, life expectancy in terms of health, the predicted years of schooling in terms of education, gross national income per capita in terms of standard living, all these they have a major impact on the migration decision. And basically the statistical analysis of all these factors, they are conducted by UNDP every year. And according to that index, it may be interesting for you. India is ranked as the 131st out of 189 countries and other territories. As already we indicated before, migration, it can be from less developed to developed and high income regions, but lack of education, like another factor, and health services, skilled labor force, and employment possibilities, better employment possibilities with higher wages, and of course the human development, like making up as a human development index. With all this, it is they can be major factors to impact the individual or group of individuals to take up migration as an option, like I mentioned. And in low-income countries, the workers' gross national product per capita, it is frequently like very low, which also encourages potential and migrants to migrate to other destinations, other territories or countries that can offer them higher wages and better job opportunities. Let's like just go through the other factors, which can be like free labor circulation, migration costs. We already discussed the migration costs, that the visa related issues or other documentations. This migration cost is basically that one. It can be sometimes this is the reason why the impoverished sectors or the poor sectors of the society, they are just denied to migrate, or they cannot even afford the cost, so they are not migrating. But we also discussed that they can be, in many cases, this can also be the reason of undocumented migrants. And of course, the taxes and government safety net, when we are talking about the taxes and government safety net, we should think it on a macro level. The macro level policies taken by both or established by both the home countries and the host countries. Both countries have to have a bigger role in this. I mean, it is vice versa, like both on their, it can be like when we were talking about the push and pull factors, they can be both affecting, depending from which angle or aspect you are looking at it, as a push factor or a pull factor. Then social insurance schemes and programs, again, better opportunities for education, healthcare, and yeah, and all this like post retirement benefits. They are just a few of the primary characteristics that function as a pull factor for a destination. And of course, insurance and remittances. The one of the maybe most important, once again, like one of the most important factors in the entire this group that we talked. But let's now wrap what we have said about the economic, in general, the factors. As you see, we have just talked about the in general, the factors. We discussed the neoclassical and Marxist perspective on how to look at it. We discussed also in between, we saw the non-economic factors also that can have an economic impact on taking a migration decision. So now let's, do you have anything to say or add? If you have, you are welcome. Otherwise, just let's see the sensitive and insensitive to immigration policies of the economic determinants. So there are two reasons why immigration rules have little or no impact on migratory groups that are unconcerned about immigration. The individuals, the first one is that individuals involved in various types of migration are frequently nationals of the receiving country. Return migration, ethnic migration, when we are talking about this. And the second one is the receiving country's government believes that migration is advantageous to the country. In the case of high-skilled labor migration. This we should keep in mind, that when we are talking about the benefits or the positive impact of migration on the receiving country, then it is we are generally keeping in mind this for the high-skilled labor migration. This happens when in case of the high-skilled labor migration, I mentioned before that it can be positively affecting the receiving country also from the economic aspect. International migration, like it is like between a specific sending country and a specific receiving country, it can increase even when the gap between their income, economic performance narrows, because unemployment in the receiving country may just fall despite the shrinking distance. In general, when we are talking about the receiving and the sending countries, we should keep in mind that they have economic differences, and receiving countries, they are particularly subject to immigration policies in international migration. But of course, we should not forget about the sending country also, because after all, it's the general migration, or the general policy, or the general economic policy that is affecting this migration decision. And of course, factors governing economic factors we have discussed, but immigration policies as one of them. It has to be like taken into consideration primarily. because the large number of people migrating across borders for work, it has put pressure on countries, on receiving countries, like we mentioned, and international organizations to change immigration laws in order to either facilitate or just the opposite, to restrict the migration flows. That's why immigration policies, they play a big role, especially nowadays. The role of immigration policy for promoting or regulating the flow of migrants and migration decisions to destination countries is very important. And potential migrants from developing regions may be more attracted to nations with relatively lax entry policies, whereas countries with fairly rigorous entry laws, they frequently discourage migration. And immigration policies, they influence migration costs. They can influence also various aspects of the migration decision. And in the research on migration, immigration policies, they are frequently used as a proxy for migration costs, in fact. Like this is like a wrapping up, or summing up what we have said, the social network. When we talked about the family, the society, the social network, if you remember, the social network also plays a big role for encouraging, or just for encouraging, or sometimes even restricting migration flow. These social networks, they can they can just influence the decision to take migration. And the non-economic factors, they can include like the mental, physical well-being, optimism, aspirations, risk tolerance, all these things, which are non-economic factors, they are also in some cases important. It is considered that when an individual is an optimist, then only in that case he can perhaps take a decision to migrate. Or an individual who is risk tolerant, he can be the first one to, like, for example, to take a risk to migrate. And of course, there are social networks. They can also either encourage or restrict. And maybe that's it. I think it was like too much, but let's go to this the previous slide. Let me see, where we were talking about push and pull factors. Yeah, these push and pull factors. I'll just keep this for your information, because there you can see the non-economic factors also. Non-economic discrimination, poor healthcare, war or oppression, corruption, crime, compulsory military service, environment, climate, famine, pandemic, attitudes. The recent example of pandemic, it was another thing that you can just look into and understand how it impacted the flow, migration flow. And the pull factors for non-economic, within the non-economic determinants, this can be the family, friends, in general, the social network, like we talked about, rights, freedoms, property rights, law and order, amenities, culture, language. These can all be like within the pull factors of non-economic dimension, like the culture and language. What it means, it's like we mentioned, the language proximity. It can affect, I mean, in many cases, when maybe they are less, from the sociological aspect, when they are less risk tolerant, for example, they can choose to the destinations to those countries as their destination for migration, which have some language or cultural proximity. Maybe that's it. if you have anything to add to this, if we have anyone who is from this economic background and who has some ideas on this to share with us, you are really welcome. So just don't, yeah, just don't feel not to share anything. If you have something to say, you can. No, no. Hello?
Yep, can hear you.
Yeah, you can, Vinod, what's your background?
I have a bachelor's and post-graduation in like in management, economics, and commerce.
Yeah, then perhaps you can share something if you have in mind. If you think that it's relevant for this, then you can.
I mean, nothing specific. I was just going through the list and thinking through as you shared.
Okay. Deptaru Chatterjee and Sophia. Guys, you can say something. Or maybe
Nothing from my end, Ani ma'am. Thank you for the presentation, though.
thank you. Did it give you some insights, or how was that?
Yes, it was a.
Have you?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether you have had any discussion or anything on this topic like before, whether you had any idea on this before.
Yes, I am actually from immigration background, so yes, but this is good to know the theoretical aspect of it.
Okay, I'm glad to know. I mean, it's just like a general idea, and later on, if you want to understand it deeper, then of course you should like, if you have time, you should go through some literature or perhaps some data analysis done by the UN, UNDP, and that would be helpful for you to get a general picture also of the entire this policy aspect also. But generally, when if you notice, like when we are talking about the about one single factor, whether it's the economic or non-economic factor, they are not like taken in isolation. I mean, when we are talking about one factor, it is of course accompanied by another one also. You cannot just take one cannot take an individual decision or a group decision for migration, for taking up migration as an option, just considering only the economic aspect. I mean, the economic and non-economic factors, they just go together. Maybe at some point of time, some factor is more prioritized than the other, but after all, they are just not working isolated. I mean, they are all together, and they are intermingled, let's say.
Ma'am, there was a reference to technology in one of those pull factors, if I'm not wrong. Can you elaborate a bit more, like how is that a pull factor, considering like today access to technology is everywhere?
Yeah, that's a good thing. Like, of course, the technology is affecting, but now, like, see, there are mainly like, for example, in the IT background, people who are working from home these days, and COVID as a non-economic factor in this case, it affected this also. Like many people who work through these IT technologies and whose work is generally from home, they can work from anywhere. And in that case, when we are talking about having a positive impact on the economy of the receiving country, in this case, that's absent. Do you agree or not? I mean, when you are working from a specific place, of course, you are working for that, for example, for an international organization, which is registered in some country, but you are working from your home. In that case, of course, you are to a larger extent, you are not having an economic impact or not influence, like there is very less economic impact on the receiving country in this case. I think so. But maybe you would have some idea which can be like just be the opposite. But the technology, it can, from the economic aspect, but from the social and political or psychological aspect, we also discussed during the first class that it has a big role for the diasporas in general, for the better collaboration and within or communication within and between different diaspora communities of the same origin country. That is that is not the economic aspect, but rather the emotional or psychological or social political aspect. But from the economic aspect, when we are talking about impacting the receiving country, maybe in this case it is a little bit vague, or it is not even that much visible. So that field is not that much visible. Maybe you can take up it as some case. You can just take up some case study and see how it works from the economic aspect.
Right. And if I kind of elaborate the thought process that you just shared, these days we can definitely see a lot of organizations coming in and like setting companies here, especially in the technology space. So that means it might reduce a lot more of migration to the global north. Is that the thought process?
Of course, it can. It can have it can again have an impact on the high skilled labor migration as well, because after all, the primary or the primary decision that they are taking for migration, the primary factor is, after all, the higher wages or economic well-being of the individual or the family. So if they can, and especially when they are not so positive, like we mentioned, as a non-economic factor, and they are not too much risk like prone or risk tolerant, then perhaps they would not take up the decision to go to some second or third destination country for that, when they are getting it here through some international organization working in their home countries. And that can, to an extent, reduce it. But the other thing is that maybe it's part of the global economy thing, which is also like related to migration, but to which is affecting migration, but it is not like part of the entire migration flow study or research. But of course it is affecting from the economic aspect and from the value cost aspect also. This entire international organization setting up their branches in global south countries, in this global south region, in South Asia region, or so it can definitely affect that, also have an impact on that.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you going to have some, Firoz, will they be having some research or something like that? Because I remember on the inauguration day, there was some discussion on that they will be writing some small paper or something like this.
Yes, yes, that task is there to write some small paper and all.
Ah, okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, then those who are like specialists on this, they can definitely, if they have some background in economy, it would be like a good opportunity for you people to work on this. I think there is very less research also in the scholarly literature as well.
Yes, yes, that is there.
Yeah.
Yes, they can add.
Mm-hmm.
It's all depend on them कि what topic and what area they want to
Yeah.
see.
But I guess that for a person who is coming from the economy background, it would be a little bit complicated to work on the political or the social aspect of diasporas and migration. It would be much easier to work on the aspect of economy and how this entire yeah, thank you too. How this entire policy, micro and micro level is affecting the migration.
Yes, that is there. So it will be totally how they select the things. So we'll check for that, and
Yeah,
we'll encourage if they want to continue with the economics thing. So it will be a good thing for them.
yeah. Okay.
Anything else is there, or we can wind up then.
Yeah. And then see you on Saturday.
Yeah. So
Okay, and
guys,
thank you for your
have you have any?
collaboration.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye bye.